Hi guys, welcome back to Economics Verified. And in this lecture, we are going to take a part 2 from Unit 3. So let's begin with it. So the first topic that we're taking up today is called as dryland farming, and let us understand what is the meaning of dryland farming. So, dryland farming is done in areas where rainfall is very low. So, this type of farming is done in areas where rainfall is quite low and irrigation facilities are also limited or absent. So, either you will see that irrigation is quite limited or it is absent altogether. So, irrigation is limited or absent in these dryland areas. Okay? So, if in these areas rainfall is so low and irrigation is either limited or absent, the question that arises is that how is farming actually done then? So, what do farmers do is that they depend on the moisture that is, stored in the soil after rainfall. So, whenever rainfall happens, the moisture that gets stored in the soil, farmers are dependent on that moisture for their farming, right? So, dryland farming, if we talk about it, dryland farming is common in many Indian states. If I give you the examples would be Rajasthan, we'll have Gujarat, we'll have Madhya Pradesh, we'll have Maharashtra, we'll have Karnataka, and places like Andhra Pradesh as well. So these are some of the states where dryland farming is quite common. Okay, and why is dryland farming common here is because these areas are considered to be dry, or we can say semi-dry. So either these areas are dry or they are semi-dry. That is why dryland farming is taken up in these particular places. Okay, so, whatever dryland regions you will see, whenever you will see any dryland region, you will see that these areas face a lot of problems. The problems first being that we have already talked about that rainfall is quite low and it is unpredictable as well. Then we'll see that the temperature in these areas is quite high. So temperature in these areas you'll find to be very high. Then apart from this, the soil that is found in the dryland regions, the soil is very weak and the soil is also very less fertile. So the soil in these areas is not quite fertile. Okay, soil is less fertile. Then if we talk about groundwater in these areas, so groundwater is also very limited, and like I told you that irrigation facility is either absent or limited, so groundwater is also very limited in these areas. And these areas often see a lot of droughts happening. So when droughts happen in these areas, they usually tend to destroy the crops, right? So droughts, when they happen, they tend to destroy the crops. So these are some of the issues that dryland areas face. Okay, so naturally, if there are so many issues in a particular place, the farmers living there also face a lot of problem, and because of that, the farmers here are usually quite poor, and they often struggle to get stable income and food. So they struggle with income and food, the farmers of these dryland regions. And if you compare it with the states that reaped the benefit of green revolution, such as Punjab or Haryana, then you'll see that there is a very drastic difference between these dryland states and states that benefited out of the green revolution. But even though dryland farming is difficult, but still this area has a lot of potential if we talk about it. And it has a huge potential for growth, we can say. But this potential has not been fully developed because government policies have mostly ignored these regions. Okay, we can say that the government policies have ignored these regions. So if we talk about the Swaminathan Commission, so Swaminathan Commission had said that I have taught you rain-fed farming in the last video, right? So rain-fed farming, if we talk about it, rain-fed farming covers almost 60% of your entire cultivated area. ठीक है, 60% of your entire cultivated area is covered by rain-fed farming, and it I have taught you that it covers like 45% of India's total agricultural output. So 45% of total output is received from the rain-fed region, right? So if we talk about it, that dryland plus rain-fed regions, these regions become very important for Indian agriculture. Now let's talk about some dryland crops which are common crops, and we can see these crops in dryland farming regions. So you will see jowar as a very common crop, then you will see bajra, you will have ragi, you will have groundnut as a very common crop which is grown in the dryland regions, and oil seeds. So these are some of the famous dryland crops that you should remember. Okay, and these are the crops that are grown in low water conditions, and that is why these crops are mainly famous in dryland regions. And you can also notice, right, that these crops are healthier if we compare it to crops like wheat or rice. These crops are quite healthier and they are more nutritious also. If we compare it to crops like wheat and rice, these are healthier and more nutritious also. And we all know about millets, right? That millets are rich in iron, they are rich in calcium, and they also have some healthy carbohydrates, right? So these are very nutritious food, and millets is very common in dryland region. So can you see that there is a huge scope for improvement in the dryland region given the kind of crops that the dryland region produces, right? And according to some studies in a lot of districts, what we see is that the actual production is like 80% lower than the potential production. So they are not even producing, they're only producing like 20% of their potential, and they can produce lot more, and they're currently producing 80% lower than what they can actually produce. So they're currently working only on 20% of their total potential. So this is what we can see, that the production can be increased in these areas, and if production is increased in these areas, then these areas are going to aid to the GDP a lot, right? So, since these dryland regions face a water crisis a lot, what can be the possible solutions for it? So, we can use, simple water conservation methods also. We can adopt some water conservation methods in these areas. And what can these methods be? So, these are some methods for water conservation. And these methods, if we follow these, we can store, rainwater, and we can also improve our water availability. Because if we're following these methods of water conservation, and if we also start storing rainwater, then water available that is there for the farmers, this is going to increase, so more water will be available to the farmers for farming. This is also called as in situ water conservation, which means that you are capturing the monsoon rainfall. What are you capturing? You are capturing the monsoon rainfall, and then you are storing it in soil. How are you storing it? You are storing it in soil, or if not in soil, then you're storing it in very small structures, so that you can use it in the dry seasons, that upcoming dry seasons. Either you use it directly from the soil, or you're storing it in small structures and you can use it from there. So this kind of conservation is called as in situ. So we have farm ponds, we have check dams, we have something called as contour bunding, and we have percolation tanks. So just remember all these names for your exam, right? So we've talked about a lot of potential of dryland farming. Let us now talk about some of the constraints of dryland farming. That what are the potential constraints of dryland farming? The biggest constraint that we can see is the government neglect, right? This is the biggest constraint in dryland farming, because policies are focused on, irrigated farming, as we can say, and dryland farming has been ignored. So first constraint is your government neglect. Because whatever agricultural, if I talk about all the agricultural policies that we have studied till now, we have talked about MSP, we have talked about procurement, and that research should be encouraged in these areas of agriculture and all, and credit should be provided to farmers, and these all support, or I can say these all agricultural policies are mostly supported for crops like wheat and rice, right? And these crops are grown in the irrigated areas. That is why we can say that government neglect is the biggest constraint for dryland farming. Then we can say that price incentive is also not provided for dryland farming. This can also come under, government neglect only, that price incentive is not created for these crops. Scientific research, if I talk about it, scientific research is also not promoted in dryland areas. So we can say that these are the biggest constraints for dryland farming. Until and unless this is not solved, dryland farming cannot be promoted enough, and dryland farmers are not going to benefit. So I'll share the notes of dryland farming with you. Please go through it. Read about the prospects of dryland farming. We've already discussed this. And do also read about the constraints of dryland farming, right? We have discussed both the constraints and prospects of dryland farming. Let's talk about organic farming and zero budget natural farming now. So, organic farming is not a new term for us. We've been hearing about organic farming since a lot of years, right? As even when we were in school, we have talked about organic farming a lot. Now, let us understand the complete meaning of organic farming. So, organic farming is a kind of farming system that mainly uses, your natural materials instead of your chemical fertilizers and all. So, organic farming uses natural materials rather than fertilizers or chemical pesticides, etc. So we don't use any chemical products, we use only natural materials in your organic farming. So you avoid, what do you avoid? You avoid any kind of chemical fertilizer or any kind of chemical pesticides. Okay, basically chemical related products. And there are also weed killing chemicals. So you know what weeds are, right? Weeds also are a kind of plant that grows in between the crops that you have planted. So we also use a lot of chemicals that are weed killing, so we avoid this also in organic farming. And we also avoid genetically modified crops. So genetically modified crops are also not a part of your organic farming. So if you ask me what is genetically modified crops, so the genetically modified, or we also call it GM crops, are those kind of plants whose DNA has been altered. Okay, so DNA of these plants have been altered, and we have altered it through some genetic engineering. We have done some engineering and we have altered the DNA of these plants. And why we've done this is to basically introduce some traits that we want in these plants, we want traits such as resistance to pest, let's say. So we want that these plants should be able to resist pests on their own. So these kind of traits we have introduced genetically, we have engineered these traits into these plants, and that is why we call it genetically modified, because we have taken the help of engineering, we have taken the help of genetic engineering to basically design these type of crops. These are not naturally found, right? We have done some engineering to modify these kind of crops. So if we have been showing resistance to chemicals in organic farming, what is that we actually use in organic farming? So instead of chemicals, organic farming basically uses your compost, right? It uses cow dung. Apart from it, we use some natural pest control measures. We do not use chemicals for it, we use some natural pest control methods. And we also do crop rotation in organic farming. I'll come to what crop rotation is. So we take help of crop rotation in organic farming and other eco-friendly methods, okay? And all of this is done to basically improve your soil. We want to improve our soil quality, and we also want to protect our crops. So apart from improving soil quality, we want to protect our crops, and that is why these are the methods that we resort to. Crop rotation means that I am doing repeated cultivation of crops in a certain sequence, which means that I am not planting the same crop over and over again in my land. I am repeating the crops. For example, if this year I have grown rice on my land, next year I'm going to grow wheat, and then uske baad wale next year mein I'm going to grow moong, for example. Okay, so in this manner I'm going to repeat this sequence. I'll grow rice in the first year, then in second year I'll grow, I'm taking year as an example, but for a certain time period. Okay, so for a certain time period I've grown rice, then I've switched to wheat, and then I've switched to moong, and I'll then repeat the same pattern. Then I'll again go to rice, then wheat, and then moong. So this is what repeated cultivation means, right? And do not confuse it with land rotation. Land rotation is not the same as crop rotation. In land rotation, we do not cultivate on the same land, we change our land. But in crop rotation, we are changing the crops that we grow in each period, right? And this is mainly done to improve your soil health. And how does it improve soil health if we talk about it? So see, different plants, if you take different plants, are going to require different kind of nutrients, right? For example, if you're growing corn on your field, let's say, so if you grow corn on your field, corn is kind of a crop that uses nitrogen very rapidly. So if there is any kind of nitrogen that is present in your soil, and if you're growing corn, then all the nitrogen in the soil is going to get used up very fast, okay? So corn has this property. But if we, for next year, let me give you an example that we have planted some pulses, okay? So when you plant pulses, like I've taught you, pulses are also nitrogen fixers. So they'll again increase the nitrogen content in your soil, they're going to increase it again. So this is how soil health is maintained. Imagine if I keep on growing corn every year, then the nitrogen is going to get exhausted, right? And it won't be replenishing on its own, right? That is why growing different kind of crops which have different properties is very important for maintaining the soil health. And that is why we also switch to crop rotation as a measure in organic farming, to maintain the soil health naturally and not be dependent on any kind of chemicals. So see here, organic farming is a system that relies on your natural inputs and does not rely on, any kind of chemical inputs. And we exclude using any kind of fertilizer, pesticide, herbicide, which is chemical based, right? We do not resort to using any of these. And we also do not use genetically modified organisms, like I taught you. And we, use organic matter or compost or biological pest controls, crop rotation, and all of these methods. So please read about organic farming from here, and we will now talk about your zero budget farming or ZBNF. So what is zero budget farming? So zero budget farming is basically an Indian farming method. Okay, this is an Indian farming method which basically tries to reduce your farming costs. So the aim is to reduce your farming costs. And how do you reduce your farming costs? Is by using all the locally available natural materials. So you resort to using all the locally available natural materials, and you do not use any kind of expensive market inputs. So you say no to using any kind of market input that is expensive, okay? And how does it claim so? Is that it says that the microorganisms that are present in your soil, so we know that there are a lot of microorganisms that are present in the soil. It says that these microorganisms help your plants to basically grow. So these microorganisms help your plant to grow naturally, right? Then it also says that all your natural systems, they can basically control your pests, so you do not need to use any chemical pesticides, etc., to get rid of pests. The natural systems can themselves, basically control your pests. So the idea of ZBNF is that the nature can itself support farming. So it says that nature itself can support, farming. And it also says that your farmers should basically support all of these natural processes that are there. So farmers should support these natural processes, and they should not be, depending on any kind of chemicals. So farmers should be also supporting your natural processes instead of depending on these chemicals. So this is what, zero budget natural farming says. So zero budget natural farming, I hope it is clear to you. This is an Indian method which says that it wants to reduce the farming costs by using all the locally available natural materials that exist, and we say to all the market inputs. And it says that nature can itself support your farming. And these are the three criterias, not criterias, basically features of ZBNF that we can say. That it says that if you talk about soil as microorganisms, it can help the plant to grow, so you don't need to add any kind of fertilizer chemically to it. Then it says that natural systems can themselves control pests, so you do not need to add any other chemical to it. And then it also says that if farmers can support these natural processes, it would be good. You should not be relying on any kind of chemicals. So this is what zero budget natural farming was about. Now you can read about zero budget natural farming from here, and it would be clearly understandable to you. We now move forward and understand why organic and natural farming is very relevant for India as of now. So since the time that we got independence, and because we were a food importing country, so we started using basically chemical based methods, okay. And these chemical based, if I talk about chemical based farming, this has helped us to increase our food production. There is no doubt about it that our food production has increased a lot, thanks to chemical based farming, right? But we cannot be, always dependent on chemical based farming. This has also created a lot of environmental problems for us, and we are aware of these problems, right? We've talked about how soil quality basically got reduced during the time period of green revolution in a lot of states due to use of fertilizers. And we've talked about how your soil has become weak, and it has also become less fertile over all of these years due to the usage of chemical fertilizers each year, right? If you talk about the harmful effects of pesticides, so pesticides have also led to death of a lot of useful insects, and these insects are, for example, your bees. So pesticides has also harmed insects like bees, which are your helpful insects, right? They help in pollination. And the use of pesticides is also lead to groundwater pollution, which is a very harmful effect of it, right? And at this time period, if we talk about the agricultural market right now, we see that the cost of all your farming inputs is increasing very rapidly. So the cost of inputs is increasing very rapidly. But if we talk about crop prices, the crop prices are not rising equally with the rise in inputs, okay? So the crop prices are not increasing as much as your costs are increasing, right? Which means that the profits of farmers would be falling. So the profits of farmer is going to decrease अगर उसके cost बढ़ते जाएंगे और crop prices equally increase नहीं होंगे. In that case, profits of farmers are going to fall a lot. And that is why we say that at this time period, organic and natural farming can basically reduce all your input cost. And if it reduces your input costs, and if it improves your profit, we should basically adopt your organic farming methods rather than relying on your chemical methods, right? Because for small farmers, this kind of production, if they follow organic farming methods, then they can see that their profits will be improved, and they will also see that they don't have to waste a lot of money on expensive market inputs when they can reduce their input costs. Now let us talk about some prospects of organic farming, and then simultaneously we are also going to discuss about the constraints of organic farming, okay? So we have seen that organic farming has quite a bright future in India, and it is also right now the most important thing to do as in Indian agriculture, right? So it can help your farmers, it can also help your consumers, because if farmers are going to receive a fair price, then consumers are also going to receive a fair price, right? And it is good for the environment also. We have understood all of these by now. And it is not like a new method for us Indians, because earlier also we were dependent on cow dung or compost for our farming. It is not that organic farming would be very new to Indian farmers and adoption of it would become difficult, no, right? Because earlier also we were doing the same kind of farming before the introduction of green revolution, because these practices are sustainable in nature, okay? These practices are sustainable if you use these methods. If you use organic manure, if you change your crops regularly, if you use natural pest control methods, if you also use soil conservation methods, then in that manner you are making agriculture sustainable, which is a very important thing to do right now. Apart from this, demand for organic food is also increasing a lot, so we say that demand for organic food in India is also rising. So it is rising inside India also, so Indians are demanding it, of course. And in foreign countries also, demand for organic food has increased a lot, because people are becoming more health conscious, and as people are becoming more health conscious, the demand for organic food is going to increase only day by day. It is not going to fall from here. And rich and middle class people are also ready to pay high price if required, just to get a better quality, or we can say a pure quality of food. And they're also willing to pay higher price for it, because they believe that organic food is more healthy, much more healthy, and it is safe also for them. That is why we say that the market in India for organic food is expanding quite quickly, and that is why it has a lot of potential in the coming time. If we talk about India in 2016, we see that Sikkim basically became the first completely organic state in the entire world. So Sikkim proved to be the first complete organic state in the world. So it was a complete organic state, and it was the first state to do so in the entire world, right? And Sikkim proved that large scale organic farming is possible if the government provides proper support to the farmers, and if it provides proper help during the transition period, because now agriculture is in a transition phase, right? So if the government helps the farmers in this phase, so organic farming, we will see that it can be done on a very large scale, like Sikkim proved. And organic farming basically can also handle all of your climate change. So organic farming is meant to handle all kind of climate change that takes place, and it can also handle any kind of weather problems that are there. So organic farming is strong enough to handle any kind of weather problem or climate change problem that exists. And if we resort to organic farming, we will see that this will help our soil basically to store more water. But chemical farming does not help the soil to store more water, but organic farming improves the soil quality so that the soil can store more water in it. Under organic farming, we also grow multiple kind of crops. We do not restrict to one crop, we grow multiple kind of crops, which also helps us to maintain biodiversity, which is important. Okay, so it also helps us to maintain biodiversity, and this will naturally reduce all your pest and any kind of disease attack that exists. Organic farming is going to prevent that as well. So these were all the prospects of organic farming. Now let us discuss some of the constraints of organic farming as well. So what are the constraints of organic farming? The first constraint, which is very important to understand, and this is we can say the biggest criticism also of organic farming, this is that crop production. We will see that when we resort to organic farming methods then we see that crop production often decreases instead of increasing, because chemical farming helps to increase crop production very quickly. But in organic farming, the crop production decreases if we switch to organic farming. In the beginning it decreases, but slowly when your soil also adopts all these methods, then the crop production will start to increase. But initially the crop production decreases a lot if we switch to organic farming, and this lower production is called as penalty. This is called as yield penalty. So please remember that crop production decreases in organic farming in the initial phases, and this decrease in output, or we can say lower production, is called as yield penalty, because your soil is taking time to recover, right? Your soil was used to chemical farming, and now your soil is taking time to recover naturally, and farmers also need more time to learn organic methods. So due to this adjustment phase that is there, this adjustment phase means that crop yields are going to basically fall for some years in the beginning due to this adjustment phase. And if your country already has poor farmers, then if your crop production also decreases, then it is also going to be financially a very hard time for these farmers, right? So it is also going to create a lot of financial pressure for them, and it also may lead to food insecurity, because if crop production decreases, it might also lead to food insecurity. So to avoid any kind of food insecurity situation, the farmers need government support in this transition phase if they want to switch to organic farming. But we know that government support is not enough in India, and it is something that is lacking in the agricultural setup, and that is why it is difficult to switch to organic farming as of now. Then the second criticism is that if you want to switch to organic farming, you need basically something called as organic certification. Okay, you need something called as organic certification, and this is quite expensive to obtain. This is not easy to obtain, this is expensive to obtain. The process to obtain is also very complicated, especially for your small farmers, and that is why all of the certification costs, if we talk about it, and all the other complexities, they act as a barrier for your small farmers to enter into the organic farming setup. Okay, So to obtain this certification, the farmers need to maintain some kind of records. So you have to maintain some kind of records. Then apart from this, some inspections are also going to happen in your land. So तुम्हारे farm में some inspections are also going to take place. And then of course, like I told you, also have to pay some fees, or there is some cost attached to obtaining this certification. So this process is also very difficult for your farmers to adapt. That is why they also avoid organic farming. There is a cheaper alternative. If we talk about it, there is a cheaper alternative which is called as participatory guarantee system. So this cheaper alternative is called as participatory guarantee system, or the PGS system. So what this system does is that it allows all your local communities that exist, it allows all your local communities to verify organic farming together only. So these local communities can come together and they can verify how the production is taking place. So basically they can verify the organic farming together only. That is why it is called as participatory guarantee system. So the local communities are going to participate in this inspection process themselves only, and they can verify for each other whether the method that is being taken place is correct or not. But the problem is that this kind of system is not accepted everywhere. Okay, so this is still not accepted in a lot of places. Then, if we talk about market access for organic products, we will see that the market access is also concentrated in your urban areas only. So, farmers from the rural areas can't access these market directly. Okay? So, market access is in urban areas, or otherwise, it is in the export sector only. So, basically, all your organic products mainly sell in your big cities, which are your urban places. And if not in big cities, then they are sold in your foreign markets only. Okay? So rural area, if we talk about it, so rural markets do not see demand for organic products. Rural market has less demand for organic products. This is also a big constraint for your organic farming. Then next constraint that we can say is that India still has not developed a proper system for organic farming. And what is this proper system? If we talk about it, so we do not have proper systems for collecting your organic produce. So even if we do organic farming and if we produce something, we do not have proper system for collecting it. We do not have a proper system for storing it or for grading it. So we lack proper systems for a lot of things. So we lack infrastructure, basically we can say, right? We lack infrastructure for organic farming. So better infrastructure is needed. If infrastructure is not improved, then organic farming is not viable in India. We say that organic farming is not viable in India. So the next constraint that we talk about is that knowledge transition is difficult. What do we mean by knowledge transition? So right now we are in a phase of chemical farming, right? And switching from chemical farming to basically your organic farming, this requires you to learn completely new methods, which is not easy. I also talked about that organic farming is not that something is new for our farmers, but still to switch completely from chemical farming to organic farming still requires you some kind of knowledge, and that is currently lacking in India. So knowledge transition is difficult if we talk about Indian markets. So go through it, read about prospects of organic farming. Please read about the constraints of organic farming as well. We've talked about it in detail.